Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. This episode will also appear on Food Tank's podcast, Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg, and you can find it wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Today, I get to talk to Eleanor Kuntz, the CEO of LeafWorks Incorporated, a botanical verification company using genetics to improve label transparency for the global botanical supply chain, including cannabis and hemp. She also serves as the co-founder of Candor Herbarium, the world's first cannabis herbarium. The institution functions as a repository for breeders and farmers to document and define their plants, which is a critically important step as this economically important crop comes out of many, many years of prohibition. Eleanor and I were supposed to be on the same panel a few weeks ago at South by Southwest in Austin, but unfortunately, like so many events over the last couple of months, it was canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we get started, Eleanor, I just want to make sure that you and your family and your colleagues are all safe and healthy during this time.
Thank you, Dani. It's really, really awesome to be here. I'm very pleased to say that we are all doing well. We're hunkering down. Possibly a little bit too much screen time is happening with the transition, but we're really lucky that everyone is healthy and everyone is staying in their little spot and hunkering down and waiting it out and trying to keep everyone else safe.
Absolutely. Those are really important things to be doing right now. Hanging out with family, keeping everyone else safe, and trying to keep doing the important work that I think you're doing especially. Before we get into COVID-19 and how that's perhaps affecting a lot of cannabis breeders and farmers, I do want you to explain why cannabis needs sort of certification. What are cannabis appellations and why are they so important?
Yeah, it's a really huge topic, but it's this really interesting place where you've had an exceptionally important agronomical crop that has gone through a period of really deep darkness through prohibition. And so because of prohibition, a lot of really interesting things have happened with cannabis. And so throughout that process, we have an explosion of different types of cannabis types within the United States, especially. We have the epicenter of diversity within cannabis types within California, and they're disseminated all over the world. And so you have this generation of a lot of interesting plants that have specific properties that are not only used and acclaimed for their recreational properties, but also for their deep medicinal value. And so because we have such diversity and we have such localized communities growing special plants, we really have an opportunity to transition this mysterious mystique of a plant into a proper framework of an epilatory framework like we do with wine or Parma cheese or Parma ham or our real special foods where the food and the person or the community stewarding the plant and the food interacts with their local environment to produce a product that's really much more than the sum of the plant, the person, and the place. So the 1 + 1 + 1 is greater than 3. And that's the beauty of an epilatory system. And so in California right now, we are working collectively to establish the epilatory framework and the Appellations framework so that groups and farmers and specific breeders who really have taken care to pick out these special plants from their populations and create these very unique either populations of plants or specific plants, have the opportunity to establish that elevated relationship that they have with that plant and the elevated quality of that plant that's due to the care that's happened historically and the place in which it's grown, and really put that into an appellation system so that then they can really explain to the world what they're doing. So it's really a framework to communicate to other people the work that they've done and the value add and the specialness of that interaction.
Absolutely. It adds gravitas. It takes away the stigmatization that has happened. These are not, drug dealers working in the woods. These are people who really care deeply about the land and what they're growing and about biodiversity and resilience and agriculture. So it's a really interesting time for these growers who have been described to me as, people who've been farming who came, to California maybe as back to landers, and they've have this sort of, in the best way, a hippie ethos to protect the land and really respect it. And so, again, the stigmatization has really just sort of made those folks suffer in ways that they didn't have to, and made the whole industry suffer. How concerned are you about, this crisis is affecting a lot of different parts of the economy, and as you and others were working so hard to get those appellations in place in California, how do you think the policy will be affected? Will it be put off? What will happen in that realm? What will happen on for policymakers? Will they even consider it this year?
Yeah, well, we right now are in the commentary period. So the state regulations for Appellations just dropped a few weeks ago, and we're in the commentary period. And we just had a really nice roundtable yesterday through the Berkeley Law Clinic discussing this. And it doesn't appear that the state is going to extend the deadline for commentary. Okay. So it seems like it's rolling out just as planned. We'll see if they have an exception and extend that commentary period due to the situation that we're all in with COVID-19. But regardless if they extend or not, the process is rolling, and I'm really grateful for that. And you did mention this, back to the land, community hippie spirit that comes with a lot of this work. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of a lot of the work that has been done, and one of the reasons why Appellations are so important to those farming groups in particular, because the framework of Appellations can also help protect the plant and the individuals that have been growing this plant Absolutely. From losing out in the commoditization of cannabis, where it's going to transition into very few types grown in very large scale, which has a time and a place, but there's also a time and a place to really steward those special plants, especially the medicinal plants, that might not have the same market value and the same market drive, but they have deep importance within a particular group of people who are using it as medicine, and just preserving that biodiversity, right? Like it's very easy to lose biodiversity, and we've taken generations to generate all of these spectacularly different plants, and so we want to make sure that we maintain them in the future and don't lose sight of things that maybe don't have the most bang for your economic buck, but have a lot of deep importance in other aspects, especially as we see the importance of health. And in a lot of ways, the lack of access to healthcare is becoming very apparent in these last couple of weeks, and the holes that we have in healthcare, and to realize that we collectively have a lot of power to take care of ourselves, especially with medicinal plants, and cannabis being a really important example of a medicinal plant that's gotten a lot of glamorous attention right now, but it really speaks to a lot of the other medicinals.
Well, I mean, that's been such a huge part of your career, this focus on medicinals. And I wonder how that came about. Were you sick? Was somebody in your family sick? How did you, have this interest?
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I didn't come to herbalism due to illness. Many people do, because they've been through the traditional allopathic system, and it's just not working for them or a loved one. And so they kind of reach out into the botanical world for a solution. Mm-hmm. That story is very common. I'm lucky that that's not my path. I came to herbalism, and I was trained to be an herbalist really because I like the plants. So I'm a super plant nerd, and my favorite plants have always been, I grew up in the South. And so in the South, a lot of our beautiful flowering understory plants are medicinals. So black cohosh, ginseng, golden seal, wild yam. So there's a lot of really beautiful plants that are in the forest communities that I grew up in that I just loved. And then when I was always interested in botany. And growing up and starting to deepen my education, I realized that those plants I loved were also used for all these different purposes. And so I became very curious as to how their use was affecting the populations of plants themselves. So I really came to the party from the plant side. and
Love
went to
it.
herbalist, and became an herbalist and studied at Sage Mountain with Rosemary Gladstar, who's an amazing teacher, and was deepening my knowledge to understand how us humans were affecting the plants we were using as medicine.
Right. It's a very cool story. And, now you have this company called LeafWorks, and you're really sort of taking what you've done with herbalism and medicinal plants and taking it to the next level. And like with the cannabis appellations, really added some gravitas to it by doing this DNA testing and making sure that these plants are valued for what they are and what they provide, not just in terms of medicinal qualities, but in terms of biodiversity and just sort of emphasizing their importance. How did that all come about?
Well, it's funny to look back to see how you ended up where you are, because it's never a straight road. So after graduate school, I did a lot of work in natural products, looking at supply chain and looking at best agricultural practices. So the practices that surround when you harvest, how you process those plants, and looking at how those best agricultural practices affect the quality of the herbal material, so the plant material. And in doing that work, it became very clear to me that one of the biggest issues in a global botanical supply chain is really fidelity. Many times plants were inadvertently, so a lot of times it's not on purpose, mislabeled, or you think you're collecting licorice, and you're not just collecting licorice, you're collecting other plants as well. And so you have this inadvertent fraud where you have admixtures of plants, or you have very purposeful fraud because the filler you're putting in, although it may be benign, is not the plant you think you're buying.
Right, it's taking away its potency or whatever, right?
Yeah, so a good example of this would be with ginkgo. So a lot of the ginkgo that we receive is adulterated with celery powder. So, okay, celery, for most people, it's not going to hurt them, but you're not getting the ginkgo that you think you're getting. You're getting this diluted, 50% ginkgo, 50% celery. Yeah. And the traditional way that, or the way that the supply chain in its current form really vets that the material you're getting is the material you think you're getting, is to use chemistry. But because plants don't produce 100% unique molecules, so the chemistry between plants is overlapping, it's very easy to find things, or it might not be easy, but people are very smart and very clever and can find other plants that when you mix them together, they're invisible to the chemical tests. And so if you're doing an HPLC or some kind of chromatography to identify that plant, if you've put in a secondary adulterant plant that falls right into the same chemical profile, it becomes an invisible adulterant. And so that's really where LeafWorks started, was seeing this happen in the supply chains that I was working for a couple of different companies and doing some consulting, and really understanding their issues with that supply chain and how expensive and hard it was to solve that problem. Realizing that the genetic background that myself and my colleagues have was really a prime set of skills that we could apply to this problem. And so that's how LeafWorks started, is really using those genetic tools to answer these hard questions so that we can get clarity on the transparency of plants, which is of course exceptionally important to the end user. You go into the store and you buy that container of black cohosh or ginkgo, you want to make sure that's what's in the bottle. But you also want to make sure that the individuals collecting the plants are given, it goes all the way back to the plant communities themselves. Where are those plants really coming from? Who are the individuals in the communities, especially when you're talking about wild harvested or wild collected plants that are they getting the money they deserve for the plants that they're collecting? It's a whole web of reasons why you really want to have transparency in that supply chain.
Right. And this is especially important for the work you're doing on cannabis too. People need to be able to trust, the plant that they're buying and understand where it came from, and understand, that the people who grew it are, being treated fairly, getting a fair price for it, et cetera. I think it's a whole sort of stream that needs to happen to make sure that people are getting a quality product and getting actually what they pay for.
Absolutely, especially with cannabis. I mean, the worst thing is, a consumer goes in and purchases something and they either really like it because it's recreational and that's the experience they want, or
Sure.
they're using it for medicine and it's giving them the positive prognosis that they need for their particular ailment. And the last thing you want to do is go back in and buy that same thing and have it be something different. And so this
Absolutely.
transition from prohibition into, normalized commerce.
Right. Like
There's been
alcohol, like food, like, regular medicines.
every,
Absolutely.
you really want to make sure that you're getting the same thing. And, there's nothing worse than you have a great experience and you buy the same thing again and it's not the same. And you either have a terrible experience, which is the worst possible outcome,
Right.
or it just doesn't do it for you. And then, you lose confidence. And so it's
Well,
exceptionally important for the brand too.
absolutely. And as you emphasized, especially if you're sick, if you're not getting the qualities that you had from your first experience, it's not going to help you with your health problem, whether it's cancer or whatever else people use cannabis for. I've been talking to a lot of health experts this week, and we've been talking about how food is used to build our immunity. It's going into a crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic, the healthier you are, the more resistant you are to getting the disease in the first place. And, we found a quote from you where you said, if we cared about other medicinal plants as much as we do about cannabis, we would all be in a better place. And I feel like in the same way food can help us, build a stronger immune system, taking medicinal plants, I think you're one of the biggest proponents of this, can offer, people some protection during these critical times.
Absolutely. Well, food is our primary medicine, right? And nourishing our body and keeping our bodies healthy and strong is one of the most important things. And food is the primary way we do that. Food and exercise, good mental health, being outside, fresh air, like those basics. And when you add in the medicinal plants, you're only bolstering your system, you're increasing your nutrient intake. A lot of medicinal plants have higher nutrient values. A lot of different micronutrients that we don't get in our daily diets. And so I feel like it's very important. And then I also think it's really important to take the appropriate plants, right? I think we have this fad mentality, like we're going to take the hottest thing. And that's one of the things that I really struggle with the herbal community is the exacerbation of plant population degradation based on fat. Like it's a fad, so we're all going to take this plant, especially when it comes from somewhere far away. It's always kind of funny to me, the new super fruits. It's like they're from the Amazon or from some strange and faraway land, and they're delicious and awesome, but blueberries grow in your backyard and are going to do the same thing.
Right.
So it's one of these things where I think it's also really important for us to make wise choices for our environments and our transport systems to take those foods and those medicines that are more local, because they're going to be better for us on a lot of levels.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sort of getting back to the stigmatization of cannabis farmers, so much has been done, by you and by others to sort of remove that stigma. Do you think we're going to go backward now? Because people, again, COVID-19 is going to have a lot of unintended consequences. And I fear that, there will be sort of a lack of emphasis on research. There won't be the money for, things that have, had a strong sort of movement behind them in terms of, how cannabis can benefit medicinally. Are you concerned about that?
I think cannabis is going to be more resilient than some of the other communities that are being affected, and some of the other industries that are being affected by all of this. And I say that just really because this community's already experienced so much adversity and has really slogged through. There's this deep entrepreneurial spirit that is pervasive through the cannabis community. And there's also a huge, it's like a kernel of hope or a kernel of positivity. It's one of the reasons why I love working with my cannabis farmers so much. There's just this sentiment that we can make it. And it's a huge amount of creativity, a huge amount of thinking out of the box. I mean, entrepreneurial spirit is like hand in hand with being a cannabis farmer. So I feel like many of those groups are really going to fare quite well because of their history and successful navigation of adversity.
That's
So
such an
I have a
interesting
lot
point.
of positive feelings about it. But yeah, the research and the more normalization side, I think we'll take a little bit of a hit just because all research, scientific research, unfortunately, being a scientist and seeing the ebb and flow of dollars that go into scientific grants and advancement
Yes.
in science, it ebbs and flows with the economy and what's hot and, where priorities are. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I what you said about the creativity and the entrepreneurship, and that's been coming up over and over again in a lot of these interviews we've been doing about COVID-19, that, farmers of all kinds and breeders of all kinds are very resilient because they've had to be. They've had to fight, subsidies. They've had to fight, prohibition like cannabis farmers have. They've had to go through a lot. They're fighting climate change. And so the ingenuity that's coming out of this, I think, is very, very inspiring to me, and showing how people can get through a crisis in lots of different ways. And that's what keeps me hopeful, talking to people like yourself and to farmers. If people want to get involved in sort of learning more about LeafWorks and the other work that you're doing, where can they go to find more information?
Yeah, well, they can go to our website. LeafWorks.com is a really good place. Also, we have a Instagram, LeafWorks DNA, which has a lot of interesting information and beautiful pictures, and sort of keeps up to date as what we're doing and community activities. So those are two locations to find out more.
And do you think once the appellation process is hopefully, passed in California, what are the sorts of implications you think that will have for other states and possibly other countries?
Well, if California steps up to the plate and really produces an appellation system that is terroir based and is truly based on the intersection of place and plant, it opens the global stage for cannabis producers from California. It launches them into a world where they're showcased for what they're doing, and it's a translatable value to the rest of the world. So I'm very hopeful for that. And as with so many things, California does lead the way. And so I'm also hopeful that we really do it right here, so that other states that are already looking to the work that's being done here can emulate something that has a lot of value and a lot of power for the farmers themselves.
Absolutely. As California goes, so goes the rest of the country, hopefully. So
not always, but it seems that way.
Innovative in so many ways, so for sure. So, I know you're grounded, you're hunkering down with friends and family. It's a kind of an isolating time in so many ways. How are you keeping inspired and hopeful? Or is there a particular person or a particular project that you've just been like, oh, that's what's keeping me going here?
Well, the irony of this whole situation in my personal life is I had an exceptionally busy month planned this month and last month.
Right.
And that's all not happening now. And so I just had a baby. And so it's sort of this
congratulations.
Thank you. So it's kind of a strange forced maternity leave, which has been really lovely to be able to hunker down with this beautiful new being and do a lot of work online. And so I have been really oddly embracing the situation and just like focusing on all of those things and really trying to slow down a little bit, which I don't think I would have done had I not been forced to stay at home.
I love it. That's great.
So,
that's really nice.
I'm absorbing it really and just taking it in. And I'm really lucky to I live with my co-founder, Karen Law and her husband. And so we have a really nice little compound that we're just hunkered down on and, doing, a lot of the work we can online, and the work we can't, we're, tending the seeds as best we can for those projects, and, life will move forward.
It will move forward, and we're already seeing that. So again, people can find out more information about LeafWorks at leafworks.com, the Candor Herbarium, candor.org. That's Candor with 2 N's. Thank you so much, Eleanor. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're one of those people who I was most excited about meeting in person at the Natural Products Expo that was canceled last month, but I hope that happens very soon. This podcast, a reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg, and you can learn more about Eleanor and LeafWorks and all the incredible work that they're doing on foodtank.com. Thanks to all of our viewers and all of our listeners. Please join us back here later today at 5 p.m. for an interview with Jessica Toussaint, who is working to help hospitality workers in Seattle. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Please stay safe and healthy.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been so wonderful to chat with you today.
Thank you. You too. Bye.